Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for what I promise will be an extremely boring video. Now, I say that because it is a video for Robert Frost's poetry. Not inherently boring, but as all of my poetry discussions include a reading of the poem, this poem is fairly long, and I trip over words all the time. I'm not going to get through this clean. But because not only is there one Robert Frost poetry reading in this video, there will be two. Neither of these poems is particularly short, but so there's a reason there will be two, but it is because of the one and what the one is, and because I couldn't think of anything else to talk about. But we'll get there. So, the poem in question is Wild Grapes, and Wild Grapes reads as such. What tree may not the fig be gathered from? The grape may not be gathered from the birch? It's all, you know, the grape, or no, the birch. As a girl gathered from the birch myself, equally with my weight in grapes one autumn, I ought to know what tree the grape is fruit of. I was born, I suppose, like anyone, and grew to be a little boyish girl. My brother could not always leave me at home, but that beginning was wiped out in fear the day I swung suspended with the grapes, and was come after like Eurydice, and brought down safely from the upper regions. And the life I live now's an extra life I can waste as I please on whom I please. So if you see me celebrate 2 birthdays and give myself out as 2 different ages, one of them 5 years younger than I look. One day my brother led me to a glade where the white birch he knew of stood alone, wearing a thin headdress of pointed leaves, and heavy on her heavy hair behind, against her neck an ornament of grapes. Grapes, I knew grapes from having seen them last year, 1 bunch of them, and there began to be bunches all around me growing in white birches. The way they grew round leaf, the lucky's German. Mostly as much beyond my lifted hands, though, as the moon used to seem when I was younger, and only freely to be had for climbing. My brother did the climbing, and at first threw me down grapes to miss and scatter and have to hunt for in sweet fern and hardhack, which gave him some time to eat, to himself to eat, but not so much, perhaps, as a boy needed. So then, to make me wholly self-supporting, he climbed still higher and bent the tree to earth, and put it in my hands to pick my own grapes. Here, take the tree top. I'll get down another. Hold on with all your might when I let go. I said I had the tree. It wasn't true. The opposite was true. The tree had me. The minute it was left with me alone, it caught me up as if I were a fish, and it the fishpole. So I was translated to loud cries from my brother of, "Let go. Don't you know anything, you girl? Let go." But I, with something of the baby grip acquired ancestrally in just such trees, when wilder mothers than our wildest now hung babies out on branches by the hands to dry or wash or tan, I don't know which, you'll have to ask an evolutionist. I held on uncomplainingly for my life. My brother tried to make me laugh to help me. "What are you doing up there in those grapes? Don't be afraid. A few of them won't hurt you. I mean, they won't pick you if you don't them. Much danger of my picking anything." By that time, I was pretty well reduced to a philosophy of hang and let hang. "Now you know how it feels," my brother said, "to be a bunch of fox grapes, as they call them. that when it thinks it has escaped the fox by growing where it shouldn't, on a birch, where a fox wouldn't think to look for it, and if he looked and found it, couldn't reach it, just then come you and I to gather it. Only you have the advantage of the grapes. In one way, you have one more stem to cling by, and I promise more resistance to the picker. One by one I lost off my hat and shoes, and still I clung. I let my head fall back and shut my eyes against the sun, my ears against my brother's nonsense. Drop, he said. I'll catch you in my arms. It isn't far. Stated in lengths of him it might not be. Drop, or I'll shake the tree and shake you down. Grim silence on my part as I sank lower, my small wrists stretching till they showed the banjo strings. Why, if she isn't serious about it, hold tight a while till I think of what to do. I'll bend the tree down and let you down by it. I don't know much about the letting down, but once I felt the ground with my stocking feet, and the world came revolving back to me. I know I looked long at my curled up fingers before I straightened them and brushed off the bark. My brother said, "Don't you weigh anything? Try to weigh something next time, so you won't be run off with by birch trees into space." It wasn't my not weighing anything so much as my not knowing anything. My brother had been nearer right before. I had not taken the first step in knowledge. I had not learned to let go with the hands, as still I have not learned to let go with the heart, and have no wish to with the heart, nor need that I see. The mind is not the heart. I may yet live, as I know others live, to wish in vain to let go with the mind, of cares at night to sleep, but nothing tells me that I need to learn to let go with the heart. That is Wild Grapes. Not wild horses, wild grapes. So, normally, if you have spent any amount of time on this channel, I don't give a damn or a half a damn for what a poem was written, why a poem was written, why a short story was written, why a novel was written, what it was that the author put into the work. I only care about what's in there and what we can take out of it. So if an author wrote a poem for a specific reason, it does not matter to me. If an author wrote a short story or a novel for a specific reason, does not matter to me. What I care about is what the words actually say and what it is that we, the readers, can sort of jimmy out of it. So, to be honest with you, when I read this poem, I couldn't think of a single thing to say about it. I couldn't think of a single thing to say about it. A decent poem, decent story, sort of weird characters, I guess, for me. But I couldn't think of anything to go with. So I looked it up. I looked up the poem. And it turns out there is a story behind this poem. So fellow literati, Susan Hayes Ward, whom I gather was one of the first people to ever publish Robert Frost, was an editor of sorts, I suppose. Didn't look too much into it, so don't take my word for it. Look it up for yourself. She told Robert Frost, "Hey, I like that Birches poem you've written. I think you ought to write a Birches poem for girls." I don't know if this is something that Robert Frost stated or if this is something I'm conjecturing myself. So take this with a grain of salt. But I don't think Robert Frost ever thought Birches was a masculine poem. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read Birches. There is a video on the channel for Birches as well, by the way. Birches by Robert Frost reads as such. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker skies, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazies their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away. You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load. And they seem not to break, though once they are bowed, so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods, years afterward trailing their leaves on the ground, like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in, with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees, by writing them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise, to top branches, climbing carefully, with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward feet first with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. And so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood, when your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb back branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. Now, I imagine that when Frost wrote Birches, and again, maybe I'm mixing up the notes that I had read with what my own conjecture is. Maybe this is just straight my conjecture. I imagine when Robert Frost wrote Birches, he did not think, oh, this is a guy poem. This is a masculine poem, or this is a poem for the boys. I don't imagine that's what happened. I imagine he just wrote the poem. It was conjecture from Susan Hayes Ward that said you need to write one for girls. So, I don't know that we can assume any masculinity in Birches as planted. However, the femininity, which is mirrored in Wild Grapes, would be mirrored in Wild Grapes as designed by Robert Frost. So what is it? What is it that Robert Frost has deigned to label in practice as feminine? The first thing that stands out to me when comparing these poems is the sort of abject solitude of the primary boy figure in Birches, as compared to the fact that the girl character in Wild Grapes has such a need for companionship that her brother tries to escape her, but often he cannot. We have that phrase at the beginning of the poem of Wild Grapes, "My brother could not always leave me at home." So the big thing that sticks out to me when comparing the two poems is that the girl version of the poem has so much to do with company, has so much to do with someone else being there, has so much to do with companionship. Whereas the boy's version of the poem, as is labeled, has much to do with loneliness, has much to do with solitude. There is even the part where whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. And after that, of course, we get the images of the boy playing by, or slightly before that, of the boy playing by himself. But then, the really sort of compelling parts to me about comparing from Robert Frost or Robert Frost comparing, I think it's fair to say that in order to build the feminine qualities in Wild Grapes that he believes he put in there, in order to build those, he extracted what he thought was masculine from Birches and flipped them. I think that's fair to say, right? So this idea of solitude versus companionship, that is taken from Birches, flipped, mirror imaged for the Wild Grapes poem. Now, the culmination of this, in Robert Frost, we often get masculine characters who are of a depressive mindset, who are of a, so in Paul's Wife, Paul, the masculine ideal, he's a loner. You say the one wrong thing, lickety-split, he's gone. Now, because he's the masculine ideal, he can wander off and there's someone else willing to take him into their camp because he's going to do 60% of the work as one guy. So that's out there. In the Axe Helve, we have our speaker character who is alone. We have no reason to believe he's not a loner. Everything we get from that character is persnickety, is curmudgeonly, and is of the alone qualities, except for when he's invited into his neighbor's house. I'm going to blank on that character's name. It's a French-Canadian name, right? Jacques, something like that. So we're going to call him Jacques for the video, for this video, right? Maybe it's his nickname. I don't remember. So Jacques is loner enough, though he is married, to be sneaking around his neighbor's property in the middle of, was it nighttime? Whenever it was. He's loner enough to be sneaking around there and just grab this guy's axe, right? So we get these great images of, I don't know if you can hear the sirens, but I live in hell. We get these great images of men working, sort of loners, sort of depressive. After apple picking, very depressive poem if you ask me. The Road Less Traveled by, go back and reread that poem. Go back and reread that poem. I know it's a Hallmark type of rhyme scheme. Go back and reread that poem. Anyway, we have a lot of depressory in masculinity from Robert Frost. So in Birches, masculine speaker, where are we at here? I should have marked this. I apologize. I'd like to get away. So this is the last bit of the poem, Birches. One might be able, I mean, there's no stanzas here. But when you look at it, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines. So that's a sonnet's length. Last 12 lines of Birches reads as such. I'd like to get away from earth a while. And this comes from nowhere, by the way. This statement comes out of absolutely nowhere. Our speaker is reminiscing of being a child and swinging from the birches, and then he says, I'd like to get away from earth a while. I'd like to get away from earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. Now, if that doesn't strike you as one of the most sort of textbook depressive statements you've ever heard, I mean, maybe I just don't understand. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb back branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. I'd like to leave earth a while. Now, we get the qualifying statement. I don't want to be half understood and never returned. But that feels a little bit like hedging your bet when what you've said is, I'd like to leave earth a while, and what I'll do is I'll climb a tree toward heaven. Sounds like a pretty common way to leave earth. So that's what we get at the end of Birches. What do we get? That's what we get at the end of Birches, the masculine trip. What do we get at the end of Wild Grapes? So what we get at the end of Birches is an allusion towards making oneself not around anymore. And a little bit of reflection on love. I think Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it would go better. And this is from a very lonely character, a very lonely speaker. This is what we have at the end of Wild Grapes. It wasn't my not weighing anything so much as my not knowing anything. My brother had been nearer right before. I had not taken the first step in knowledge. I had not learned to let go with the hands, as I still have not learned to go with the heart. And I have no wish to with the heart, nor need that I see. The mind is not the heart. I may yet live as I know others live, to wish in vain to let go with the mind of cares at night to sleep, but nothing tells me that I need to let go with the heart. We have the reference to love But the love is more definitive here. The love says, once my heart gets caught onto something, like my hands were, I'm not letting go. It can just spring me around like the birch tree did. But we also have here, earlier in the poem, pointing towards that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Hot damn. So this is the last 12 lines of this poem, too, just like that was the last 12 lines of Birches. So what we also have here is we also have the reference to climbing on the birch tree and not aliving anymore. So earlier in the poem, where is it here? And the life I live now is an extra life. I can waste as I please, on whom I please. Stating that that which happened when the birch tree sprung her was an exit from this existence. Just like our speaker in Birches says, that springing forth that he longs to do in the birch tree. Maybe you're still around. I mean, hey, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'd like to be here, but if that is not the case, if I'm not around, hey, I was just misunderstood. No harm, no foul. Simple misunderstanding. If I don't make it back in time, if I don't make it back at all. So it seems that part of the masculine-feminine dichotomy between these two poems is incumbent on dealing with loneliness and how it is that loneliness is dealt with. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. Lots of poetry discussions on the channel, over 100 in the poetry discussion playlist. If you like this sort of thing, it really helps me out here on the channel if you hit that like button. If you're here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to make sure that these videos continue getting suggested to you in the future. And I've got to go. I've got to spend some time alone now. Nothing weird about that. Just being alone. That's it. Nothing lonely about it. Just solitude. Just a guy thing. You know how it is. Birches. Bitches.